eclipse? How was the eclipse?
Yeah, the eclipse was great. The glasses worked really well. I tell you what, it went on longer than I thought. It was like at least an hour from the start to the finish. Actually, might have been even more than that. And yeah, I mean, I spent more time outside. I didn't put any suntan lotion on, so I got burned on my forehead and my nose. One of those type of things. But it was. I'll tell you what, it was definitely worth watching and sitting out. I was a little on the fence on whether it'd be cool or not. I'm like, I don't know. It was definitely cool.
Pretty cool, huh?
Yeah,
it's pretty really eerie. Cool. It's pretty eerie, isn't it?
It really was. Here's the thing: we weren't quite in the path. The term you were looking for,
totality, right?
Totality, right?
That's right.
The path of totality, right?
Yes, yes.
We were not in that. So I would say we had the moon blacked out. I would say 4/5 of the sun. So there was a little sliver. Sometimes when you see the moon with the crescent moon, there was kind of that look. So it didn't get like completely dark where I was in Maryland. We're further south of the path of totality, but it was significant in terms of like the temperature went down probably 7-8 degrees, and like you were saying, the birds were a little bit messed up too. A lot of chirping going on. So there were things like that, but it wasn't the complete like darkness that we saw in some of the areas.
Okay, Jim Duquette is with us, former Major League Baseball GM for the Mets and Orioles, MLB Network Radio, Sirius XM. You can follow him on social media at Jim Duquette GM. It's all brought to you by Flatstick Pub. Whether it's a date night, guys' night, ladies' night, large group event, they've got you covered there at Flatstick Pub. Visit one of their 6 locations across the Northwest, flatstickpub.com. Big thanks to Andy Largent and the crew. We talk Major League Baseball storylines every single Monday with our GM, Jim Duquette. We'll get into the Mariners a little bit, but let's go to one of the huge number one storylines, another arm injury. We talked about it last week. There was a fear that he was going to be lost for the season, and those fears came to a head. Spencer Strider done for the year, another arm injury, and another superstar, Jim, that we've lost to these arm injuries that have just been a pandemic this year for these guys.
Yeah, it's been going on for a while. The high end velocity, the hard spin rate, those are the 2 key factors. I had Dr. Glenn Flatstick, who is a research and biomechanist with Dr. James Andrews out of Birmingham, Alabama. I had him on my radio show on Sunday, and he basically confirmed that in his research, that's where a lot of these injuries have come over the last 10 years. It's the spike in velocity, it's the training that's related to the velocity, and it's the chasing the spin rates. And they don't have any answers. That's the bothersome thing at this point is Major League Baseball, they're doing a bunch of studies to kind of confirm it, try to come up with some initiatives. But here's the thing, and this too, like you're not going to tell starting pitchers when they are throwing as hard as they are and they're getting results and they're getting paid for it, they're not going to back off and learn how to kind of add and subtract until they have to, until the velocity comes back a little bit, and in early 30s or mid 30s, somewhere along those lines, when some of these starting pitchers start to age a little bit. So the days of like when we saw Justin Verlander, which doesn't seem that long ago, right? He would start the game off throwing 93, 94, and then when he needed it later in the game, he was throwing 97, 98. Like that's not happening these days. It's straight fastball velo right from the start. Go as long as you can and as hard as you can. And I think that is a big aspect that's contributing to these major injuries.
Yeah, and I think you just kind of touched on it. It's I don't know what slows it down, because these guys, they know if they throw harder, they know if they throw with more spin, they're going to get paid. Look at Strider. I mean, there's no way that Strider's going to take it back after he just secured his livelihood and really his kid's livelihood, because he just got a $75 million contract from the Braves.
Yeah.
So right, Jim? He would have done it all over again because it got him paid.
It got him paid. And the hardest part on this too is, as a sport, when I was in the front office, we drafted guys who threw hard, but we also told them, listen, when you throw this hard, like this is the last time that you're going to get paid to be throwing hard. You need to have command. You need to have control. You need to be able to change speeds and control bat speed. But now, where does it stop? Because kids that are throwing and pitching, and are drafted in the first round, they're throwing 94, 95, 96. If you're in high school and you're throwing that hard, you're going to be a first round pick. You're going to get paid millions of dollars as a draft pick. So it's continuing to be fostered even at the youth level. And I think that's where the biggest concern is like, okay, if we gave them some incentive to not have to really chase velocity and train for velocity as kids when their ligament isn't fully developed, and maybe we could prevent some of these injuries 5 years, 6 years, 7 years later when they're pitching professionally.
I want to see if I understood correctly. I heard the soundbite that you put on social media of the doctor that you guys talked to and that you interviewed.
Yep.
Did he say that the use of the spider tap that they used to use on the baseballs, to doctor up all the baseballs, did he say that actually helped them and would have prevented injuries because it's less stress on the ligaments?
So he felt that in some ways, the jury was still out on that. His feeling was that in some ways, the way that the ligament is reacts when you're gripping the ball harder, because right now you don't have the tackiness to it, so you have to grip the ball harder. He felt it was kind of like the opposite. He felt like because of that, the force would and the way the ulnar collateral ligament responds, that it would in some ways take some of the pressure and the I guess more the pressure than anything else of the ligament as you're throwing this high end velocity. The torque is what the word used. But there's no real scientific data to back it up. Like that part of it they hadn't studied yet. So like there's some things that they've studied, they have a long-standing record of, and then like the pitch clock as an example. I think that's more because it's only been 1 year, they don't have a ton of data. I asked the question, because we've had it at the minor league level, and they didn't, even though they've had that data, they didn't show a correlation to more injuries and the pitch clock. And it's not comparing complete apples to apples, obviously, because they don't throw as hard in the minor league, but it's still something that they're trying to figure out here.
But he felt, at least to me, how I read it, listening to it, he felt that the pitch clock, he doesn't think that that's the issue why, or certainly not the number one issue on the biggest factor of why these guys are suffering so many arm injuries.
That's correct. He didn't think so. The injuries so far with the pitch clock haven't gone, there hasn't been more injuries by comparison to the previous 10 years without the pitch clock. In his mind, what has been the huge increase has been that velocity spike and the spin rate spike, and that the fact that now Dr. Keith Meister, who's based out of Texas, he did Spencer Strider's surgery. He's saying he's seeing more and more what's called explosive injury. So the ligament is coming off the bone, where like in Strider's case, his ligament, which was a second reconstruction, did not come apart. And so he could put a brace into that ligament and reinforce it. And so he can come back a little bit sooner. Some of these guys that the ligament is coming completely off the bone, you're seeing what's called explosive type injuries. That's what he is seeing more of, and that's because of the high end velocity in the different kind of sweeping sliders and the kind of power changeups or split fingers that he's been seeing more lately.
This is why I just knock on wood here. This is why I feel that it's inevitable here with Matt Brash. He's not back yet. I know he's getting closer, but it just feel the day is going to come where Matt Brash is going to have the same surgery.
You certainly hope not but you
Yeah.
wonder, right? Some of
Yeah.
these injuries, that you have when you have this elbow injury, it's almost always related to the ligament. And when you hear, okay, well, there's no, tear, we don't see any tear, you just see inflammation. Well, there's something that's causing the inflammation that eventually, at least in my experience, we've seen where guys end up getting the Tommy John surgery.
And you almost wonder with him. I mean, I know this decision was, kind of out of his hands, came up as a starter, right? Then they
Yeah.
changed him into a reliever. And for him, he's probably thinking, I wish I would rather have been a starter,
Right.
because if I had one season like Strider, I get paid. And then
Yep.
if it happens, I've already got my money. It's
Right.
very rare, right, Jim, that these relievers, well, they never get paid like a starter.
Right.
But it's very rare these relievers, unless you're Eddie Diaz, get these big contracts. And guys because Matt Brash knows, I mean, he is a special talent, but he's a dime a dozen. They'll just rinse and repeat and find somebody else that can come in and take his spot.
Yeah, I think that's the big concern, right? You go into that bullpen and you can pitch for a couple of years, and then relief pitching itself is inconsistent. If you're a dominating reliever, like Josh Hader got I think 80 million, 85 million, something like that. You mentioned Diaz was over 100 million. There are a select number of guys. Montero, believe it or not, when he was consistent with the Astros, they gave him a $34 million deal. But it's not the 100 million or more that the starting pitchers are getting. There's a clear difference between, the good relievers and what they're getting paid versus the really good starters.
Yeah, it's a real worry. What would you do? I mean, if you were sitting in a front office right now and you sat down with ownership, baseball personnel, or just in a big group think tank with MLB.
Yep.
How do you combat this right now? Can you stop it? Can you prevent it? Can you put some safety nets in to prevent all these arm injuries from happening?
So a lot of this is the training aspect of it. So making sure that you train the entire body, not just the arm, to make sure the efficiency and the pitching delivery. So I'm kind of taking that at what it's worth, and saying, okay, the sports performance people, they do their thing. But limiting the workloads for me, I would go to a 6-man rotation. And it's hard to find 6 really good starters, but I would almost the entire season go with 6-man rotation. Go if you have got 5, that 6th one I would go with a bullpen by committee, like you see an opener with a bulk guy. And the other thing that's kind of Major League Baseball in some ways, it's something that's concerned me is all right. You're going to limit the number of pitchers of the roster, right? So you have 26-man roster. I think the max number of pitchers you now can have is 13. You never have restrictions. I'd let the teams decide if you want to have 13, you want to have 14 out of 26. Go ahead and have the extra starter, the extra pitcher, the extra arm, so you can get through games and you're not having these. They did it because they think the offense, the pitching is so dominating that it's hard to hit all these different relievers, and teams are using 6 and 7 relievers. But I look at it as more of a safety issue. Let the number of pitchers, let them, if a team wants to use 7 pitchers that day, not all of them are going to pitch well. It's really hard to do, and I think you can do your damage offensively that way. But I think more on the player safety is important more than anything else.
Jim Duquette with us on Major League Baseball, GM, Mets, and Orioles, MLB Network Radio, Sirius XM. Follow him on social media, Jim Duquette, GM, brought to you by Flatstick Pub. Visit flatstickpub.com for all their locations. Okay, so the Ohtani cleared, right?
Yeah.
Federal authorities come out. Hey, this was a one-man act here by the interpreter. He was able to somehow get $16 million out of an account. Does this clear him 100% in your mind? I don't know if you had any doubt if he was associated with this, but are you now, with what has been revealed here in the last week, say, all right, Ohtani didn't know, let's move on and focus on baseball?
I think from what the federal investigators came out and said, that seemed to me to clear Ohtani. And they basically said he's a victim here, a major victim. Was there a major kind of trusting, over-trusting, naivete? Yes, all of that. He's guilty of that. But it doesn't sound like he's guilty of paying any of the debts, knowingly paying any of the debts, doing anything from the illegal side of things where he paid a bookie where it's illegal in the state of California, and it certainly doesn't sound like he placed any bets himself. So those are the things. I'll tell you the one line, and I don't know if you saw this, but the one line that really stood out was there was a text between the interpreter and the bookie, and the bookie was trying to get in touch with the interpreter because he owed him a lot of money and he wasn't returning his calls, and he says, well, I'm down here at Newport Beach and I see Ohtani walking his dog here on the street. I'm going to just go up to him and talk to him and say, and in my mind, I'm going, like, that's exactly what you don't want. This is why you are careful who you surround yourself with anyway. Somebody coming up, off the street and not even knowing what the heck, Ohtani didn't even know what was going on. There could have been threats placed towards Ohtani physically for what this interpreter did. That the seriousness of this is, it's real. It's not just about the money. There's so many other things that could have happened out of that. That line or paragraph in the 37-page document, whatever it was, really caught my attention.
Scary. I mean, that's like, broken legs, people, somebody something happens to his wife or what have you. You just don't need that, that type of stress in your life. I guess I would I don't know how often you check your bank account. I think most people check their bank account a lot. Okay.
Regularly. Yes.
Okay. And that's us. All right. This guy has got millions sitting in a bank account. And for a guy to take $16 million out, I guess, maybe he trusted him too much.
Yeah.
But the checks and balances failure of this, Jim, where is it? Where are his agents, his financial advisors? How did they even allow the interpreter to have just the access to the private account that he set up in Arizona that was just for the Angel's salary? If you're a financial advisor of Ohtani, how do you even let that happen? If I'm Ohtani, I'm looking at those guys, the agent, financial advisor, I'm firing all of them. Yes. They're all gone.
Yeah.
Because they failed at their job.
100%. And Wall Street Journal had a really good article about the failure there by CAA, and the fact that they didn't have a Japanese speaking employee to communicate directly to Ohtani is stunning to me, right? And the fact that so they were having communication, but they couldn't communicate directly to Ohtani, so they were going through the interpreter, and they were asking him some of these questions, and the interpreter was lying to them by basically saying he wants to keep the account private. So, all right, so that they're definitely a fault. How about the banks? The banks were duped by the same guy. They were calling, asking for confirmation on the wiring of money, and they were talking to the interpreter. They didn't know. They thought they were talking to Ohtani.
That's the other part. How does that happen? Especially with that amount of money, where you can voice activate, you can actually talk to someone there and then get it and then just pretend to be somebody else. I mean, that is just, you're right about that. It's unreal. Yeah. Well, I say this and we'll move on. It hasn't affected his play at all.
No.
He has been spectacular for the Dodgers. It's amazing that it hasn't affected him at all in the at the plate.
I cannot believe. It just speaks to his greatness as a baseball player. Yeah. Despite all of these failures, going on in his own personal life, once he's been fit between the lines, it's been incredible. And really since the second game in Korea, when he started playing without the interpreter at all, his OPS, well, last time I looked, was over 1,000. Like, it's one of the best in the sport. And it's been incredible what he's been able to do. Just to be the ability to compartmentalize once he gets between the lines. I'm sure I've seen this with other people who've had personal things going on, like the outlet of just being on the field and having, getting away from any of your personal issues for, 2.5, 3 hours is probably a respite for him. But it's been impressive what he's been able to do offensively, and consequently what the Dodgers have done here too in the early part of the season, despite some of their own injuries.
Yeah. Out here in Seattle, we're having our own issues with our baseball team. They find themselves, as we're talking right now, on Mondays, they get ready for a series with the Reds, 6-10. They just dropped 2 out of 3 against the Cubs. They lost in the most painful and miserable ways you can lose a baseball game. A walk-off pickoff with your superstar. I want to know what you think and what the kind of the national sense is going on right now with Julio Rodriguez. There's a lot to unpack here. One, he was supposed to have the day off, a mental break. He's struggling once again to start the season. This is not new. He starts off every year just the same way, where he doesn't hit early in the season. They give him a day off, but then they insert him late into the game as a pinch runner, and then he gets picked on. He doesn't speak to reporters afterwards, declines to answer any of their questions. What are you seeing or hearing about why he once again is getting off to a slow start for the Imps? Because they clearly, as a team, offensively go as he goes.
There's no doubt. I think this is a lot about the offense, the pressing that you sometimes see with guys. That part of it on the offensive side, and it's they are so much built around him that I think that pressing takes on a level of its own, because if you look around the rest of the lineup, he's not getting any help either. Like sometimes, in this sport, right, you cannot carry a team to the degree you can in the NBA or the NFL with a quarterback. Like the ball's in, not in his, in his court, so to speak. He has opportunities to help win the game only so many times during the course of the season, during the game rather, versus like football with a quarterback. He controls the offense. Same thing in the NBA. You can set up every play around one particular guy if you want. So you are relying on others, and he's not getting any help within the team either. And so that, I think, exacerbates the problems a lot of times. Is okay, well, now that I'm up, I need to do more. And really, you should be thinking, well, I got to take what they give me and do less and hope that my teammates help me. So I think that there's that unfortunately, that self-fulfilling prophecy that goes on there. I mean, I cannot believe not only the lack of runs, but the strikeouts are still there too. Like that's the concerns. Like this is a team that's not supposed to strike out. They struck out in double digits in 2 of the last 3 games against the Cubs too. So and then we get into the runs scored and what they're averaging. I think it's 3rd worst right now in the sport. And I think most people will say that that the offense is a lot worse than they thought. And the pitching hasn't been nearly as good either, unfortunately.
This goes on for another month. Do you think a move will be made? A manager, something happening?
How far out are they? Like to me, a lot of that depends on how far out, because that bar to get into the wild card is still, it's lower in the National League than the American League. It's still, I think, between 88 and 90 wins in the American League. So like that they can't get too far away from that. But 2 years ago when they got to the postseason, they had a very, very slow start too. It happens. It seems like every single year, unfortunately, with Seattle. But it has to be, to me, a long, like to the point where you're like, they got no chance to come back, or very little chance. And that's usually double digit, games back of the last wild card before you can actually say, okay, they're completely out of it. And if that happens, you might see wholesale changes through the organization. But I think early on, that they're, it's pretty clear, owner, before the season started, that this is like jobs are on the line if they don't win. You put all of the blame this winter on the front office. I thought it was unfair, but that's what the owner did. I thought, and you and I talked about that a couple of shows ago.
Yeah. Angel Hernandez. Why is he still allowed to be an umpire in baseball?
I'll tell you. I've talked about this. I've talked about this since I got into broadcasting, but I used to complain about it when I was in the front office. And you can call all you want. We used to call if we had bad calls against us, and MLB never. They wanted to hear it so they could review the video, but they couldn't do anything about it because of the strength of the umpires union. I don't believe there's been an umpire in the last 30 years that's been fired for cause. Like when I say cause, meaning poor performance. That it just doesn't happen. They have tenure. So a guy like Angel Hernandez, it's well known that he's been confrontational. He's not a good umpire, but everyone swears that he's a good home plate umpire. Well, his last outing he wasn't very good over the weekend. So you may see, more and more of those type of things. I feel like he's a little less confrontational than he used to be, and maybe that's an adjustment that he's made. But Major League Baseball, there's only so much they can do. And they haven't been able to fire umpires over the years, and I think that's the frustrating part. Is there's accountability for front offices, for managers, for coaches, and even players to some degree. If you're not a good player, you get sent to the minors, you get cut, you get option, but there's no such thing for a major league umpire.
It is it's remarkable because I wonder, Jim, he makes the rest of them look terrible.
He does.
He brings the whole group down, and I guess I would wonder if I'm the rest of the group who would have to make a decision on him, I would just say, hey man, you're just not doing your job. You're making us all look bad. And I don't think it's as bad as everyone makes it out to be.
Right.
we're so obsessed with every TV has got the tracer. And even our local broadcasters here on Root Sports, and they have the tracer, and they'll be, if the thing is an inch off, they're like, oh, he missed that. I'm like, it's an inch. Right. I mean, come on, guys. The ball's coming in at 95 and it's moving all over the place. The fact is, that's a pretty good call. There's got to be a human element to it. But I mean, he is so, it's so out of bounds how bad he is that I just, I don't know why they don't do anything about it. I really don't. It's a real problem, and it's a real problem, I think, for Rob Manfred and Major League Baseball, that I don't know why they can't step in and do something about it, because it's hurting their product. It's hurting the credibility of their product.
It really is. And I'll tell you, I was skeptical early on, even though I was supportive of replay. I wasn't sure about, I wanted to make sure that the replay eliminated the extremes. So, with runs at a premium, and how much a run affects a win or a loss, and how much is at stake for winning and losing. I was a proponent when I was in the front office for the instant replay, and love it or not, like it's taken away some of the really, really bad calls. And I would love to see the extremes be protected when it comes to calling balls and strikes too, because some of those calls that he made the other day were so bad and so far out of the strike zone, and it impacted favorably. It impacted the Astros against the Rangers. I mean, there's a umpire scoring card on Twitter. I forget the name of the account, but it was like, it almost affected the Astros to the positive by 2 runs. That is crazy how much it has an impact on how, a bad call by an umpire.
Lastly, it's on a positive note. It's really cool to see players come up and make their debuts, especially when they're young, especially when there's so much fanfare surrounding them. And I think it's always cool when it's with a real storied organization. And we're talking about Jackson Holliday with the Orioles. I think a real cool added element to this story is he was going to wear a different number.
Yeah.
And then there's a conversation between he and the Ripken family. And the Ripken family gave the blessing for him to wear number 7. Just an all-around cool story. Touch on that, but also touch on the player of Jackson Holliday and what baseball. I mean, there is a lot of great young talent that is in baseball right now. It is unbelievable, the amount of young superstar talent. He appears to be the next one in line.
Yeah, he was considered the number 1 prospect in the sport. He was drafted the number 1 overall pick in 2022. Basically had 1 full season of minor league ball, and now he's playing at the major league level. He went down and played for like 10 days in AAA, dominated down there. He's the son of Matt Holliday, the great major leaguer there, long time, over 10 years of service time, played great for Cardinals and in the Rockies and the A's. And I mean, so he's got the family genetics there to play well, perform well. But the number itself, number 7. So the Orioles have held this, and very few people that have worn the number 7. The last time it was worn was by Cal Ripken Sr. So Cal's dad wore number 7. And then after Cal Sr. was fired, that number was never given out again. And it's been sitting there in storage. Basically, Billy Ripken wore it for a little bit of time when he played for the Orioles, but that was it. It was basically a Ripken family number. And Cal was what, 8. So but 7 was Cal Sr. So he wanted it. they got approval, for, and they gave it their blessing, basically. And if you watched any of the games this weekend, he got his first hit on Sunday, yesterday. But Matt, his dad, was sitting with Cal Jr. behind home plate. It's just like the whole story is really, really cool. He's going to be a star. And he's going to be probably even though he got a slow start, he's going to be in the mix for Rookie of the Year conversation at the end of the season.
Yeah, it's fun. It's fun to watch these young guys come up. All right, every Monday we talk baseball with the great Jim Duquette, former MLB GM, Mets, Orioles, MLB Network Radio, Sirius XM. You can find him there. You can also follow him on social media, Jim Duquette GM, his weekly appearance, which airs on Mondays, all brought to you by Flatstick Pub. Again, whether it's a date night, guys' night, ladies' night, or a large group event, they've got you covered. Visit one of their 6 locations across the Northwest at flatstickpub.com. All right, my friend, until next week, we'll talk to you then.
All right, talk to you next week.
There he is, Jim Duquette. Again, MLB Network Radio. We'll talk to you soon. As always, we promise to be better.
No shoes, no dice.
Would anybody like to smoke some pot?
Yeah.
I was born to love you. I was born to lick your face. I was born to rub you. But you were born to rub me first.
What do you need my address for?
We'd like to send out a mailer.
Mother of mercy, I don't speak Japanese!